Hey folks, Dan the Produce Man here along with
Guido the Gardener.
Yes folks, it's Pumpkins Part 2, and the reason I say Part 2 is because right on this YouTube channel there is a videotape called My Top 5 Favorite Cooking Pumpkins. Well, now we're going to continue this with Guido. We're going to start off with some different varieties from the other video, but I do want to encourage you to look at the other video, and then the other one called Marina di Chioggia, and it's all about this marvelous pumpkin or squash, but I'm not going to say any more because I want you to watch that video. So both of those videos are on here, and now this one is too. All right, Guido.
What's the first one?
Folks, it's, well, you know, we're recording this at Dan's Farmers Market in Alameda, California. They have an amazing selection of pumpkins that we just told you about. Come on down and check it out. There's a gigantic pumpkin sitting here that's big as a house, and we want you to see that too. So come on down to Dan's Farmers Market, my old store. And Chewy, who owns it now, is doing a great job. Yeah. And so check it out. If not, you don't live locally, go to your local produce stand, local grocer. Try and support your local grocers and little produce markets, and buy real pumpkins instead of plastic pumpkins, because when you buy a real pumpkin, you are supporting a farmer. When you buy a plastic pumpkin, you're supporting a manufacturer far, far, far away from the United States.
A plastic producer.
Now, the Hubbard Squash. Now, when you buy pumpkin in a can, this is what you're getting,
Most
folks.
often this one, yeah.
This is what you're getting. Now, Guido.
All right, here we go.
Oh, look at that.
This is exactly how I cooked it. This here was a smaller Hubbard squash. What I did is I took a fairly big cleaver and I kind of cut the edges just a little. Then I took a small serrated knife and just do like that and pop the top off.
Oh, look at that. Look at that. Beautiful.
It's still got moisture.
Oh my God, folks, this is just, absolutely beautiful.
You take a very stiff spoon.
Gorgeous piece of squash this is.
So what I did is I just scooped out all the seeds and the fiber. It is very, very creamy. The Hubbard squash is buttery creamy. It's not quite as sweet or bold flavored, say like a kabocha, but the texture is amazing. And you can eat it like this, just mashed. You can mix in apples or pears or raisins as a side. You can make a soup out of it. It's just it's really amazing. And
oh, that's good just on its own.
Just like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the texture is really, really something. That is the old-fashioned Hubbard squash. You cook the whole thing in the oven, and you can freeze the flesh of all of these pumpkins for later.
All right, folks, next up is what's called Cinderella Pumpkin.
Or Rouge de Tombe. For the Frenchies in the crowd.
Okay, this is a softer pumpkin, so it's going to be very easy to cut. Very easy to cut and very easy to peel. The only problem with this pumpkin, Cinderella,
is it's got very little flavor.
Very little flavor. So what I did was I tossed it in this curry mix, and it's still
this will be my fork.
Flavorless.
Okay.
But it'll absorb the flavor of anything you cook with it, and it still has all the nutrition.
I like the curry.
Yeah. All right, folks, next up is the Jarrahdale Squash, or Jardale Pumpkin, or Jardale Squash. It's actually both. What do you think of that?
Let's put it this way. They're related. They're kissing cousins. Pumpkins, squashes.
Yeah, you can do curls with this one, too.
This is
a big one. What I did was I bought a small one to cook because...
There you go.
Okay, now this is the deal with the Jardale. It's very thick, very meaty, very, very dense and delicious. This one here, the half, I sliced up a bunch of Granny Smith apples and some cinnamon, and I think there was some honey, a little bit, and mixed it in and threw it inside and baked it. This one I brushed with olive oil, just olive oil only, and this one I just left it on its own. Yeah. So we're gonna try it now.
Either way, you're getting tons of nutrition, tons of flavor, and that's one of the advantages of cooking pumpkins is you can treat them kind of like a sponge, like a flavor sponge.
Yeah.
In that they'll take subtle flavors, they'll take bold flavors, and then once everything is cooked, this here, you could scoop this out and mash it and have it on the side. You could scoop this out and add it to whatever kind of soup or a broth that you have. And you get all this flavor and all this texture and all this nutrition. And especially now during the fall. Apples, pears, raisins, cranberries, all of those things are great with squashes. So again, folks, the one that we're eating now is this one, the Jardale.
I'm just gonna try it like this.
Go ahead.
God, what a great flavor.
Oh yeah.
And with the apple,
apple's beautiful.
You can't beat it. You know, these make great pancakes. You just puree this in a bullet or a blender or whatever you have and add it to your pancake mix. So this is a sweet version. Here's one just brushed with olive oil and then baked on its own. What you can do every single way. Check out Jardale, folks. It's a little tough to cut, but I'm gonna show you a little trick on pumpkins in a few minutes when you cut them, how to do it. Cigarette holder, she digs me. All right, I'll keep my day job. Porcelain Doll, wasn't that Buddy Brecko? Or I don't know if it was Porcelain Doll or something doll. Yeah, but that's how the song went. Here we go, folks.
One thing these pumpkin squashes have in common is they tend to be pretty beefy.
Which is definitely the deal with the Porcelain Doll. Yeah. Very, very thick, very meaty, and heavy, dense. So.
And that's one way you know if you got a good one or not, is that they're heavy for their size.
Here's one that I didn't brush with any olive oil.
Plain.
Here's one that I brushed with olive oil and some herbs. This is savory. And then here I stole our good buddy, John Steffi, the produce geek. John, if you're watching,
thank you.
Stole your idea.
Yeah.
But you're gonna do it in a video. I still wanna see your method because I bet you it's way better than this. I poured apple cider in the center of this Porcelain Doll. So we're gonna try it.
All right, oh, beautiful.
And I'll try this piece. Oh, that's delicious, folks. Delicious.
Oh.
There's garlic, there's onion, there's parsley, there's hot pepper. You put whatever herbs you want on it. That's the good thing about it. And you know, you can make gnocchis out of these. You can make...
Oh, gnocchi, for Pete's sakes. Come on.
I knew the Italian would finally come out if I pressed hard enough.
Gnocchi. Good.
You can make...
Raviolis.
There we go. Raviolis out of these. With a white sauce, it'd be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah. Marvelous texture, too. Like we've commented earlier. Very creamy, buttery texture to these.
Yes. Now, I cooked all of these at 350 degrees for about an hour and 10 minutes. Guido has another method which I have used many times too, and you can experiment around with it, but I kind of like his method, which is starting with high heat.
High heat. What I did with that Hubbard squash that we tried earlier, I put it in just naked. I didn't wrap it in foil or nothing. In that Pyrex with a little water at the bottom to keep the cleanup easier, actually. And then 425 degrees for about a half an hour.
Yeah, that's good.
And then I turned it down to 350, about another half hour, and I turned the oven off and let it sit there and kind of cool down in the oven. So what happens is that 425 degrees brings the temperature up of that squash, because they're very, very dense. They can take 4 1/4. It brings up the heat and then cook them a little lower, a little slower, get really soft.
And when you can put a fork into them and it slides in nice and easy.
Yeah, done.
That's the way to go. Let's try the one with the apple cider.
Sure. And again, this
and I just poured it in a cavity so it's not all over the place.
Apple cider.
Great flavor.
Oh boy.
But what I think John was going to do, I think he was going to cube it up and put the cider on it so it flavored all of the squash. But this is a really good squash.
This one actually has more, and maybe it's the apple cider, but it's got a fruitier flavor, more actually of a pumpkin flavor.
So I want you to notice the shape of this pumpkin.
It's squatty.
You've got a lot of meat here up at what's called the shoulder. As the pumpkin grows towards the stem, the blossom end, the meat is thinner. So when you're going to cut one of these variety pumpkins, this is called the shoulder on the stem end of the pumpkin, and as it goes down towards the blossom end, the meat is a lot thinner. So when cutting a pumpkin, You can do like we told you in the squash video, which is bake it in the oven for 15 minutes or so to soften it up, and then you can work with it. Or the best bet is, you see the blossom end is always a little vulnerable there, see? So what I'm gonna do, I'm not gonna cut this big giant one, then what are we gonna do with it after we got all this cooked squash? All right, here's a marina, and here's the same thing. Thank you. Here is the same thing. The blossom end, the stem end where the meat is thick, the blossom end where it's very, very thin. So the thinner the area, the easier it's going to cut. And you want a knife like this. You don't want a curved knife. You want one that's straight. And I don't know what they're called. I'm not a chef. But look how easy it went into this blossom end. And once it's in, then you've got some leverage to cut all the way to the stem. And then, of course, what I usually do is I take I almost cut myself, didn't I? What I do is I take a little hammer and I whack the stem right off of it. But look at this again. Look how simple it goes in, and you can make your cut that way. It's still going to be a little tough around the shoulder, but at least you've started it. And now, voila, you've got a beautiful cut piece of squash here, or pumpkin, whatever you want to call them. This is the Marina di Chioggia. Like I said, there's another video on this same channel about the Marina di Chioggia, and I would urge you to watch it.
And if you're more of a purist like me that wants to cook them straight up, is seeing as the blossom end is, well, you can either cut right there, or you cut right around here like a carving pumpkin. You pop this off like I did with that Hubbard squash earlier. You cut here, take it off, scoop it, take the seeds and whatnot, put it together, cook it that way too.
And you can fill it with stuff.
And herbs and onions and damn garlic.
All right, folks, this is a traditional pumpkin. This is the New England sugar pie pumpkin. Absolutely delicious.
It's very, very creamy. It's got a thin texture. It mushes easy. There's a word for you. And that's why it's so good for pies and actually puddings and things too. Very, very fine grained.
Yes, and unlike the other pumpkins, there's not a lot of vulnerability on the stem end. I would still recommend starting it from there just so you don't get messed up with the stem. This one, it's firm, so dense. So cutting it, do like Guido does, get a chainsaw or cleaver. Yeah. Okay, so the sugar pie, the traditional looking New England sugar pie pumpkin, is absolutely delicious. This one I cooked. This piece is plain.
We got 3 different ones for you, folks.
Yep. This one is maple syrup glazed.
Woo!
And this here has brown sugar and butter in it.
It's got a little bit, huh?
Yeah, so which one do you want to try, Guido?
I think I'm going to try the one closest to me.
There's the maple. Let me
syrup.
know what you think. I'm going to have this one over here that's just plain.
That's good.
A long time since I've had a New England sugar pie.
Yeah. It's more of a texture than the actual flavor. Again, if you treat this like a flavor sponge, you can do anything. Yeah.
Now, one thing when you're cooking pumpkins, folks, this is something a lot of people miss, but it's very important. If you're going to make pumpkin pie for Thanksgiving, or you're going to make it just to eat it, I recommend roasting the pumpkin 2 days prior. 2 days, and there's a reason for that. Now, you can go 1 day, but if you got time, cook it 2 days prior.
And why is that? Okay.
After you cook it, you can, where's that spoon? Scoop it out of the shell, put it in a colander.
So it drains the moisture out of it.
So yeah, put that colander on top of a bowl or something like a flatter bowl so that the moisture doesn't go back up inside, and let that water drip out. Let it drip out for a couple of days, stick it in the refrigerator in the back or something, and just let it all drip out. And then you've got less moisture to work with for your pies, because you don't want your pies to be soggy and wet.
Right.
You want to be dense and tasty. And that's, of course, is why I use the Marina di Chioggia. But if you're going to use some of these other varieties, the Porcelain Doll, the Jardale, the Sugar Pie, the New York Cheese, Fairy Tale especially, definitely want to let them drain.
The more dense the meat, the more the effect you're going to get from whatever flavor you put into it.
Exactly.
Because there's not as much water in it.
Right. I mean, a lot of it evaporates out when you're baking the pie, but the problem is it's going to go into the shell, and then you're going to have a soggy pie shell. So
we don't
make sure
like
it drains.
those.
And not just for pies, anything else you do with it too, if you want to have it more dense, and sometimes I'll even put a weight on top of it. So I'll put a saucer on there, and then I'll put a melon or something else on top of that to just kind of push it down, and you know, a little bit of the flesh will drip out with the water, but most of that moisture will come out and it'll be easier to work with. So that's some more of our favorite cooking pumpkins. Cooking Pumpkins Part 2. The original video is called Favorite Cooking Pumpkins for Pies and Cooking, or Favorite Pumpkins for Pies and Cooking. It's somewhere on this YouTube channel.
And eating.
Yeah, well, that part too. Yes, absolutely. Folks, this is not what you want to eat. This is a jack-o'-lantern. You can eat it if you want to.
But only if you're desperate.
Yeah, if you're very hungry, it will give you the nutrition. Speaking of nutrition, Guido, what are pumpkins loaded with?
You are going to be eating very, very well if you're eating any kind of a pumpkin, any kind of a squash. The highlight of these is vitamin A.
Absolutely.
It's like 2.5 times your minimum daily requirement of
which converts to beta carotene.
Yeah.
So,
but also high in, there's iron, there's vitamin C, there's vitamin E,
potassium.
And trace minerals too, which are hard to get in other things.
You're doing well. Now, with the jack-o'-lanterns, you always scoop out the seeds, wash them off, and roast them. They're loaded with zinc and other vitamins as well, so you get your nutrients there. So there is something good to eat in the jack-o'-lantern besides them being really pretty.
But these were basically bred to have flat bottoms so they sit, and have shallow grooves so they carve easy. The older pumpkins maybe a little bit more bred for eating, but these really have been bred to be pretty, just like Dan and I. Older varieties.
Okay, very good. All right, folks, so that's it. Another pumpkin series, and who knows, we may do another one next year too. What the heck? Why not? We'll just keep them rolling, right? Until you get the one that you like.
Yeah.
But this week's recommendations are the Porcelain Doll, the Hubbard Squash, and the Jardale, the gray one.
Yeah.
So these are the winners for this fall and this winter. You want to get these while they're heavy, because early in the season like this, that's when they're best. When the skin starts to get dull and the pumpkin gets very light, that means the moisture's coming out through the skin, it's dehydrating, it's going to be stringy and dry inside. So right now's the time. Get them now, between now and Christmas, right?
Yeah.
Or at least Thanksgiving.
They need the heat of the summer to grow. They get picked in the fall, and right now is when you can get your pick of the pumpkin and squash litter.
Hey folks, if you have tips on how you cook your pumpkins and what varieties you like, leave them in the comments below and let us know. We'd love to find out from you. And if you have a great pumpkin pie recipe, I've got a great pumpkin pie recipe that I use, and it's on my blog. It's called Vermont Pumpkin Maple Pie.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Okay. And so check that out. It's using maple syrup instead of sugar, and boy, oh boy, does that turn out great. All right, folks. Until next time, this is Dan the Produce Man saying, it's always best when you get it fresh.
And I'm Guido the Gardener, and I'll tell you what my Nonna Bessie always told me: manja.